the right to education, on educational matters. And for those young ones who have dialed in, may have seen him on Skim Sam. And you may as well watch later on. You may just see a familiar face. In the room, we also have colleagues from Corruption Watch. Corruption Watch has authored interesting report, and we have Mr. Melusi Ngala, who compiled and authored a report entitled Sound the Alarm, a report on corruption in the education space, and he's a senior researcher at Corruption Watch. And he's also joined by Mr. Tawanda Kaseke, who's a project associate at Corruption Watch. And we have Mr. Rendani Mwinzele from Vembe East District, and they will also be coming on as part of our discussion. We would like for you to share your comments insofar as this topic is concerned. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, you can use the hashtag Umlambo Foundation together with the NGC Week. Follow the accounts, the Umlambo Foundation account and the Public Protector SA account. That's where you'll be seeing some of the comments and views. Again, ladies and gentlemen, my task is not such a difficult one, other than really setting the scene and opening it up and ensuring that we have everyone in the room present. So thank you once again. Thank you for your patience. And I will hand over now to Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who will touch on the background and context and share some of her views. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me welcome everybody who is here. Welcome our guest, Advocate Talega, the Acting Public Protector, our principal, who is an important stakeholder in the forum today, colleagues who are experts in this field. Thank you so much to all of you for being here today. And of course, our teachers and principals who have logged in for this session. Schools are very important to Umlambo Foundation, as you know, but we also care about how the schools contribute to the wellness of the societies within which they exist and provide service. Schools are also places where we nurture the values that we care about, and would like to see schools as places where the children get to meet not just their peers, but get to meet role models that easily influence their lives. I don't know about you, but there are many times when you, as an adult now, you look back to your childhood, you can think of a teacher who shaped you. This is a big responsibility that we have as teachers and principals, which is why it is important that we are always aware of the impact we make on our children and in our society. Principals and teachers amongst themselves also need to provide a good impression. When teachers as colleagues fail to provide that collegial environment, when teachers and principals fail to show respect for the children who are watching, that gives them an impression that respect doesn't matter or ethics does not matter. When we think about a school as an institution which should have corporate governance, teachers and principals have to think about the way they run the schools and to be very clear that the actions they take must be able to provide examples of good corporate governance, not only to the staff, but also to the children. We are in a country that has unfortunately been in a lot of challenges. We have seen what corruption can do to a society, and things haven't been good in the education sector. And I think you'll hear from the colleagues here, which is one of the reasons why we thought we needed to gather like this. We think it is important that we discuss these issues and we help our teachers, our principals to take the corrective measures that are required. We also want to make sure that teachers and principals who have issues get a platform like this where they are with their colleagues, so that they can share their own experiences and sort of get a feeling of how do you deal with a situation like this. We also want to be sure that the Department of Education, who is the authority in charge, is part and parcel of providing solutions for the school community, for the principals, and for the teachers. So I am excited that today we have these experts, that we have an audience such as you are, and hopefully we can exchange views that can only make us better educators, because education is a right. It is important that we all do our best to create the best possible learning experience for our young people. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for setting the scene and the background. As we said, thank you to those who just joined and are now part of the live discussion. Remember to use the hashtag Umlambo Foundation together with the NGC Week 2022. Follow the Public Protector SA account together with the Umlambo Foundation account, and that's where the conversation will be happening. We'll give you an opportunity to come in and chime in as part of this discussion. Having set the background and the context to why we are here, I'll now hand over to the Acting Public Protector, who will touch on good governance and why really this topic is close to her heart, and what happens when there's no ethical conduct and integrity and good governance in South African public schools, and what is it that we can do as a society and as a community to ensure that we guard against such should it fail. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Facilitator Advocate Dumisole, Dr. Mama Umlambo Ngcuka, founder of Umlambo Foundation, school leaders and managers present, educators, and ladies and gentlemen who are participating online. A very good afternoon to you all. Firstly, I would just like to draw from an extract in the white paper on education, which was produced in 1995, which actually sets the scene of the importance of education in our society, where it states, I quote, "In a democratically governed society, the education system taken as a whole embodies and promotes the collective moral perspective of its citizens. That is the code of values by which the society wishes to live and consents to be judged." I unquote. I cannot agree with you more, Mama Umlambo Ngcuka, when you say that it is basically the backbone of our societal structure, and that is education. Let me just also extend my gratitude on behalf of Public Protector South Africa that you've seen us as an important partner in driving this message in society, and indeed it is part of our mandate to ensure that we educate and give awareness before we inculcate our powers in terms of other corrective measures as well as punitive measures. I would like to start off dealing with issues of good governance and ethical conduct, it's an entire embodiment, really. If you look at what good governance and ethical conduct is, but starting with our own mandate as Public Protector South Africa, which derives from this Constitution as a Chapter 9 institution, which is to inculcate good governance and ethics in all public affairs, and which includes schools, because schools are enacted through a public legislation. And we are commonly referred to as the Chapter 9 institution. And really our powers are to investigate all malfeasance within the state affairs, report on those and take remedial actions, not just recommendations, but remedial actions which are binding on society. We've got several legislations, which includes the Protected Disclosure Act, which most of the educators use to report matters and malfeasance within public schools to us as an institution. I think it's critical that I start with how perhaps one could describe good governance as a standard by which the conduct of public affairs and the management of public resources by public institutions are measured. It is how we determine if public resources are being utilized in a manner that is not corrupt, that is in line with the rule of law, and free of abuse by all role players within the value chain. I would just like to take from some of the work that the former Public Protector Advocate Madonsela has done, who once opined that good governance is a subtext of our foundational values that include public accountability, transparency, and integrity. Ethical conduct, on the other hand, will fall within the realm of doing the right thing by applying one's moral and professional principles, and in all material times, operating with honesty, integrity, fairness, and bona fides, or good faith, whether you are being watched or not. Most of the time, we tend to want to do good when we are being watched, and when we are not being watched, it doesn't matter what we do. But doing good, particularly when you are not being watched, that is the highest standard of ethics. Our argument, program facilitator as the Public Protector South Africa now to government and society at large, is that the standard at which we should look into our levels of society is no longer by adhering to the rule of law, but is by being ethical. Because the rule of law really applies when you are being caught. That's the time when you are being seen. But we really need to manage and properly inculcate the culture of ethics, where Aristotle, a famous late philosopher, states that ethics is basically a human being's character. Now, this is who you are as a person, which, by the way, we put trust that that person is created and crafted in the education system, because that's the system that actually breeds and grows this person from being a child. We are now looking into early childhood. So it means from the age of 3 or 4, this child is into this education system, and that is why it is of such importance to us. Now, as Public Protector South Africa, we have been commemorating our National Good Governance Month during the October month, which is the month during which Public Protector South Africa was established. And to borrow just from the words of the former and late President of the Republic, President Nelson Mandela, who spoke of those institutions as the vanguards of democracy, as those institutions that would strengthen democracy even at the most difficult of times. So it is at this time that we've done some work as an institution, and part of this work we have also visited a school and also followed up on some of the investigations that we have done that we have done at the public schools, and we have found that the situation indeed, it is still a bit long of a way to walk, but we are optimistic, and that is why we are joining hands in these kind of conversations. So any person in the country is eligible to receive our services as the Office of the Public Protector, and most importantly, as we were just having an informal conversation here, the issue was, whose responsibility is it to blow the whistle? And it is everyone's responsibility. If you are a South African or you are in South Africa as a member of the public, it is your responsibility to blow the whistle. It might not affect you as directly as you think, but it does affect you in one way or the other. And I always say, if you see your colleagues conducting themselves in an act that is unethical, and you hear of institutions such as Corruption Watch that actually give the perspective of what is happening in the education sector, you cannot say, it isn't me, when you are quiet. It is you, because you are perpetuating the conduct by being quiet. That is why we take anonymous complaints, and we've never had a blowout of the complainant who's actually lodged a complaint anonymously, because these are the kind of complainants who bring us the information to enable us to do this kind of investigation. I'm just going to touch briefly on a complainant. He was not anonymous, Mr. Obilana, who was an educator in the Mpumalanga province, who actually blew the whistle on the abuse to school children, sexual abuse to school children that takes place, the corruption in the school. When his contract came to an end, and because he was a foreign national, his contract was not renewed, and he was threatened with deportation and all other sorts of victimizations. So this is indeed the conduct that is taking place in our schools, and this is the conduct that is actually being carried out by those who are entrusted to realize the right in the Constitution, which is the right to education. And really, as a society and colleagues who actually observe this kind of action, cannot continue to keep quiet. You know, if we analyze ethics and corruption broadly, it is said the lack of courage is the lack of ethics. So in order to fight corruption and unethical conduct, we need to be courageous. It is a lot of voices that are good, but it is a very few voices which are not courageous to take out this particular action. I am just going to overall, because these are responsibilities which educators know and are entrusted with, as well as the SGBs, just to track on the higher level of ethical responsibility of school leaders, the custodians of public good. The role of education really in our country, particularly public education, has been intended to be transformative in a democratic South Africa. As a result, it is seen as a strong vehicle for social transformation and upward social mobility. We tip our hats indeed to the late former president for his powerful words that I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which one can use to change the world," I unquote. Now imagine a young soul whose psychology is broken in the corridors of education. It totally kills the dreams of a family, of a society, of a community, but most of all, of a country that seeks to balance the imbalances of the past, such as ours. In looking into these, what is critical is to looking into the leadership, the management, when entrusted with such a position, which basically means on the leadership lines, enabling others to face challenges and achieve results under complex conditions. Indeed, our educators and the school children learn and teach under very difficult conditions. We still have classes which are about 120 something pupils in one class, whereas our policy is looking at 30 children per teacher, which is like 3 to 4 times that particular number which is envisaged through all sorts of scholars who have contributed to that. Management, which means organizing internal parts of an organization to implement systems and coordinate resources. We are working with scarce resources. So that is why the coordination, the effectiveness and the efficiency of utilizing these resources are very critical, but also creating and maintaining systems, because it is within systems that we are supposed to function to ensure that whichever process that takes place, it is not corruptible. A lack of systems and a decay of systems, I normally say, it is a deliberate means to be able to enable corruption. So it is very critical that systems are managed, and that we manage even ourselves to lead and adapt to the changing conditions, because the reality is the education system 20 years back and the education system now cannot be and shouldn't be the same. For instance, we are now trying to champion for ethics to actually be part of the education curriculum. You know, we've been speaking to the Charlotte Maxeke Institute, which actually wants to start a school, and we said to them, please, can ethics be part of the school curriculum? Because that is where it begins. Looking at the school governing body, which was really to ensure that parents, educators, non-teaching staff and learners work together and promote the well-being of the schooling environment and the effectiveness of a school as a community. So it is under this community really that a child must be and feel safe, because that is the community which is intended to ensure that this child contributes to the broader South Africa in the future, and it must be transformative. And as we know that education was in the previous apartheid years used against particularly the majority of black South Africans, it cannot be then that this education system of the democratic dispensation continues to deprive the black child. Education is a human right. As you know, it is enshrined in Section 29 of our Constitution as a right. But our Constitution further goes and speaks to the right to dignity. The environment and the circumstances under which the children are put really cannot say that it envisages those, and it continues to support the many conventions that have been signed by South Africa on the protection of children, but on the furtherance of human rights and also on education. In light of what I've stated, I would like to state that South Africa's acceptance of these instruments shouldn't just be seen as an act of PR exercise, but it must really be implemented, and it is nobody else who is going to implement it, but most importantly, the educators, the leaders, the principals, the district, the province, to ensure that that is done. But the oversight that must be played by the school governing body. This is an interrelated relationship that is, by the way, supposed to ensure that there is checks and balances. Now, it cannot be that a system so strengthened by process that must be is really not moving as fast as and as smoothly that we would wish it to be. Particularly 28 years into our democracy, we should really be telling a different tale. A lot of work has been done by the government, but it is not only the government's responsibility, it is the responsibility of each and every one of us to ensure that we get this engine smoothly oiled. Lastly, let me just touch on the social impact of an unethical public service, which is really the struggles that the pupils are facing. The government procurement processes have unfortunately formed much of the public discourse pertaining to corruption and maladministration. This has occurred even in areas where there is a serious need for improvement in schools. The consequence of this is that many schools in South Africa do not have the required resources for effective teaching and learning. We are speaking of the 4IR, even going into the 5IR. Sadly, one of the schools I've visited in the past weeks, there is not even a signal. Your phone can't even ring in that particular area. And now these are the children for the future. What kind of a future are we creating? So these are the things for me really that, and I'm really not trying to condescend the role of the unions, the role of the school governing bodies. As much as the unions are fighting for the rights of their members, it is a right of their member to teach in a conducive environment, not just to earn a particular salary, so that they produce what is envisaged for the future of South Africa, not just the numbers that we rush to produce. I've already touched on the investigation that we did in Limpopo, and we also did in KZN. We found the infrastructure to be appalling. It is not conducive. There are no computer labs, yet there's computer science. There's mathematics. There are no mathematics labs and tools. There are no science laboratories in these schools. So what is expected of a black child in the majority to be able to produce is what they can't even imagine. And yet in the future, we expect them to stand as tall in the boardrooms as children who've been to the private schools and the model C schools who are their counterparts. So I think we really need to make sure that we redress these. But for me at this stage, the most important part is really for us to work on our characters, those of us who feed into the system, so that we also produce the future of character. Children is what you see is what you do, not what you hear, what you do. If they see ethics from us, we walk the ethics and we live the ethics, they will also be of ethics. I sometimes ask myself, how did the teachers miss the stage of state capture? How did they miss that? You see the lifestyle of a parent and the child. What the child is able to have in the classroom, what they are not able to have. When you fill in the forms, you know whose parent is doing what work. Because they've got a contract with the school, you know how much they earn. But the child's lifestyle is way above that. Yet, nobody saw that. It comes back to whose responsibility it is to blow the whistle. You might point the responsibility onto somebody else, but the impact of what you have missed falls on you. Like we do today, we are all suffering the consequences of state capture. But just the furtherance of that is looking also into the quality of the learning materials, the extramural activities, the curriculum itself, but the lack of also being able to identify the talent of a child. Not every child is meant to be a mathematician. Because of the large numbers in our school, the overcrowding which we are experiencing in our school, it is even difficult to identify that. We find our children in the wrong subjects, in the wrong careers, the high suicide in teenagers, and then we wonder why. The child's talent has been taken away. They are being forced into a field that is really not them. So as such, I really call and encourage you as school leaders to develop your own internal systems where there's not, for checks and balances. Upholding good governance within the public education system will not only benefit the current learners, but the future generations of our country. It will redress the imbalances of the past. And I therefore put forward a humble plea that we all take cognizance of what is shared here today, and I humbly ask that we all see ourselves as more than officials and employees, but as enablers and role models in our society, whose role is to give life to the vision of our nation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Public Protector. I think really, being on the ground and having seen it, you will hear colleagues and everyone who's joined us on the report compiled by Mr. Nkala, I hope I'm saying it correctly, and apologies if I'm not, talking to the extent of corruption in public schools, what happens to whistleblowers. And I think what the Public Protector has said is it is key and it's all our responsibility to rise up. She touched on, it takes a village, and a school as a community is thus important in ensuring that this right to education has been realized. I'm also going to request that those who join us or who are online, please, if you could go on mute. This session is being recorded, and if also you could just turn off your video for now if you're not a speaker. And when we do the Q&As, I'll give you an opportunity to come on, introduce yourself, and then we can then get onto the reflections and the discussion. Without wasting time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Livani Sinyosi. Please do get ready and join us. She is from Vembe East District and a circuit manager in Livuvu circuit in Vembe District. It is key to hear different views from circuit managers to principals, which we'll touch on shortly. And as I said, give you an opportunity to come on as people who've dialed in, principals, stakeholders, SGB, and also share your views, because this is not a, bashing educators or the system, but rather discussing the challenges that ultimately will have an impact on the life of the black child, and ensuring that we do have these frank discussions and ultimately towards the end come up with solutions and talk about how we hold each other accountable. If Dr. Sinyosi is around, please, if you could just go off mute and do come on and share your reflections. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Sinyosi is joining us. I see that. Getting off mute. If you can hear us, you could just say hello while you sort out your video, but we are here. Oh, there you go. Good afternoon. Can you hear us? It seems like we are having a bit of a technical challenge. Maybe, Dr. Sinyosi, if you could dial off and dial back on. There. Okay. So maybe let's do this, and I'm going to propose that maybe you just dial off for a few minutes, and then you'll dial back on, and then we keep the program moving. Once again, this is the nature of live events, technology, and we do have these type of challenges. Please consider putting your questions on the chatter box so that we can take as much of those questions and your reflections, because again, as I said, this is a discussion meant to empower, and more importantly, how we could hold each other accountable as we talk about ethical conduct in the education space, and what is it that we can do as colleagues, as stakeholders, to the benefit of the black child. Dr. Sinyosi, if you can hear us. If not, I'm going to ask Mr. Satere to come on as a principal and also just share the reflections. And if Dr. Sinyosi is not in, she will join just after Principal Satere. Let me just try again, Dr. Sinyosi. All right, let me then bring Mr. Satere as a principal to reflect on these discussions, and as someone who's on the ground, who's been in the education space for some time, and hear the views. Over to you, Mr. Satere.
Okay, thank you very much, Program Director Dumi, and good afternoon, everyone. And I just wanted to say thank you, Mama. I wish all principals were part of this discussion, because it's very much important for us. It's a highlight, a very big highlight, and the public protector, you mentioned something very much important. You know, principals are human beings, one thing for sure, and they are not appointed themselves. There is a process in terms of appointing principals. And when you talk of good governance, we need to understand and separate the two between governance and management and leadership. Yeah, because those are two different things. And as principals now, we are appointed in terms of SASA, which is a national act, section 16A. It says a principal is the head of the institution and it's representing the head of the department. So meaning this is done, each and every province we have got head of departments, and principals are representing head of departments. Before principals can be appointed, obviously there is a process that is followed, and we are being governed by what we call South African Council for Educators, which is very clear in terms of the ethics and how we should conduct ourselves as educators. And we are also having a very important document now, how do you manage schools, which is called the PEM document, which is the personal administrative measures, which is very clear in terms of the job descriptions of all the educators employed, in terms of the Employment of Educators Act 76 of 1998. So now it depends on individuals. How do you then implement all those policies now which are governing schools, and all those acts who have been passed by Parliament as educators. So, but it starts from all the stakeholders which need to give a support, starting from the DBE, the provincial governments, the district offices, and now the school governing bodies, which were given the powers by the Act to say they need to assist in terms of governing the schools. So it's very shocking to hear what people are talking about outside, and even what the public protector was saying in Umlambo, to say as leaders now, as principals, how do we make sure that we assist the parents now in the school governing body to make sure that we have got good governance, because it is our responsibility to make sure that we support the parents in terms of making sure that there is good governance in all the schools. Because our parents, most of them, they are not learned. They are not from school. You will remember previously this issue of corruption. It started long time ago, madam. When I was still at school now, our parents used to pay what we call a building fund. And to be honest, I even passed matric in 1989, but I've never seen a new building. But they were paying building fund. So you ask yourself, where was that money going? Even today, I don't think maybe if we can say we need a commission, you will get the answers of that. But in terms of our government, to say 28 years now in democracy, we're still talking about what is happening around the schools in terms of corruption, in terms of poor governance. How do we then appoint people or give them the positions and not give them support? Because we have got different units now in different districts, in different departments, in different provinces. To say, once you appoint principals, for example, so you need to make sure that you take them for training. You support them in terms of financial management. You support them in terms of how do they manage their educators, manage the staff, manage the learners, and the relationship between the school and the communities. Hence, the department introduced what you call the 9 focus areas. And the most important one is basic functionality of schools. In terms of the 9 focus, all the schools now, when we talk of schools in terms of good governance, we're looking at the 9 focus areas. So, which is very much important to say, if schools can do that, then I believe that we will definitely deal with this issue of corruption in our schools. Because once we do that, each and every year around September, August, September, all schools are compelled to do what you call self-school evaluation. You do a reflection to say, from January, were we doing things correctly? Looking at the 9 focus areas, including the issue of the finances, including the issue of the nutrition, and the appointment of the staff corruption watch. You talked about that. To say, did we comply with the policies? So if we did not do well, so then now, how do we then make sure that we rectify? We do what you call the SWOT analysis. So if you do the SWOT analysis now, when you do the reflection, then you rectify the mistakes that you've committed. And all the stakeholders are involved there. All the parents need to be part of that. The learners need to be part of that. The staff, the PS staff, the personal staff, and also the CS staff, which is the curriculum staff, the educators. So through that, if all schools can be able to do that correctly and compile what we call the school improvement plan, reflecting now on the gray areas that they have identified, so that when they move forward the following year, they can be able to implement SIF. And that is where you also talk about the budget, on also the needs analysis of the institution, to say how do we then make sure that we improve. And then if those documents can be implemented correctly, I believe that public protector, you are not going to get that information to say schools are corrupt. So I am not going to protect anyone, but one thing for sure, the issue of the support, the issue of implementation of policies, the issue of monitoring closely and appointing relevant people to relevant positions, then it will also assist our schools. What Gauteng has done presently in terms of addressing the issue of overcrowding, they are giving schools money. They're looking at schools to say, as a principal, can you be able to build? You know, I'm proudly to say, madam, I've done that. They gave me 3 million. I've built a very beautiful classrooms, 6 of them, and we including the toilet and the fence and everything, with that little money that I've received from the government. And I can stand account to say this is what I've done with all the evidence submitted, but through the support. And then one other thing is that once appointed as a principal, some of us will relax. And we don't learn. Maybe I was lucky because I'm also doing LLB. I'm coming to your office very soon. I will be completing my degree to say, because you empower yourself. If the government is not doing that, are you going to wait and say they're not doing anything for me? So you need to empower yourself and then network and be able to know what is happening. And at the end of the day, you're not going to have a problem. So the support from the department is very much important to all the principals. And one other thing is the issue of political influence. A lot of politics. So in my school, they know, you can mention all the political parties. They know that when they go to my school, it's not a political school. If you need a political school, you can contact the former President Kgalema Motlanthe, will direct you to the relevant place. So when you come to the school, you need to support us. That is exactly what we need, so that at the end of the day, we are building future leaders. So if you allow that now to play games with you, our politics, our leaders, I'm telling you, you're not going to get anywhere. Good principals now, as we speak, they are in trouble because they're not being protected by politicians. But those who are doing what the public protector was saying, they are protected and they are politically connected. And as such, we will continue having a very serious problem in terms of that. Thank you very much.
Again, colleagues and everyone who's joined in, this is a reflection of a principal that has been through the system. I particularly love what Mr. Satere has said insofar as principals and educators capacitating themselves, taking initiatives insofar as wanting to do better, not only for themselves, but for the kids that are part of the system, and ultimately ensuring that we guard against corruption and we ensure that the right to education is and has been realized. The political space is something that you are going to hear about, although maybe it would be in passing, but Mr. Nkala is going to touch on that as part of his report. You'll hear the horrifying statistics on corruption in the public school, and how that report was compiled, and ultimately that we need to, as the community, as teachers, principals, really reflect and take it upon us to guard against corruption, to ensure that the learners in particular are going to benefit and ensure that the right to education has been realized. We also live in a country where load shedding is a reality, and Dr. Sinyosi could not join as she was load shed, but we are going to try something extraordinary, and one of that is to give her a call and for her to join as a participant in the call, and she will speak through the phone. So please pardon us. We try to make sure that we have various views from various speakers, circuit managers, principals, and also we'll hear from you as educators as part of our discussion. So if you bear with us, Dr. Sinyosi, welcome. Again, colleagues, I'm going to just raise my voice. When dealing with load shedding and everything else, it might just rain if it's not already. So pardon the weather. I think it's also celebrating this discussion while we are here, which is really coming up with solutions and reflecting. To the extent that we may be disconnected, again, bear with us. We'll try to get back and have everyone going. It's the nature of live events, but and in the event that your comment is not on the chatterbox, resend it, repost it again. We'll give you an opportunity to get on. Dr. Sinyosi, can you hear me? And if so, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Sinyosi?
Hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Please go ahead. We can hear you, Doc. Okay, we seem to be having further technical challenges, but Dr. Sinyosi, if you can hear us, you can continue. We'll give you a few minutes to project. I know with load shedding, networks are also impacted, and again, this is the nature of live events and trying to do what we can. Let us dial you back and see if we can get you back on. Hi, Doc, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Loud and clear. Thank you very much. Thank you for being patient. You have the floor, and would like to hear from you insofar as what you've heard some of the speakers have said, your experience as a circuit manager, and your reflections on ethical conduct, integrity, and good governance in South African schools. Over to you.
Thank you very much. The Bill of Rights is very clear about the right of learners to education. And when we talk about the issue of good governance, all of us have the responsibility to ensure that the right of the learners to education is achieved, and that the learners' best interest comes first. And when I'm speaking about all of us, I'm referring to all the stakeholders. And I don't want to repeat what the principal said about the stakeholders. But what is important, if we don't join together and make sure that our learners get what they deserve, we are going to have a problem as a country. Then what is needed for all of us is that all the role players must work together in good faith and with mutual trust. And when referring to all the stakeholders, the question that I'm having today is whether really, especially when we go to principals and SGBs, because they are the main ones, are they really working in good faith and with mutual trust? It's a yes and a no. Why a yes and a no? Because we do have, let me tell you, Chairperson, we do have principals who are doing their best. We do have SGB members who are doing their best, but at the same time, we do have those who are abusing the system.
Yeah.
And when we come to the issue of the Department of Education, they are very clear. If you remember, if you can check, we do have all the policies. And to mention a few, we do have the EEA 76 of 1998. I'm referring to Employment of Educators Act, which talks to the regulation of the condition of service. We do have the SASA, South African School Act 84 of 1996, which is very clear. It intends to provide for a uniform system for organization, governance, and funding of schools. And all these, we also have SAFE and others. All these policies, they are not for few, mention few principals, but for all principals, all SGB members, all departmental officials. It means the policies are there, but the question is the issue of implementation. People know the policies, people know what they're supposed to do and they don't. But the problem is, if people know these policies, they can even sing them during interview processes, but they don't implement. It's a challenge. Because if you can see that really when we come to the issue of governance, especially concerning finances, wherein we do have some learners who are from very poor communities, poor families, but at the end of the day, they end up not getting what they're supposed to get because there are those who are enriching themselves. And most of the time, I blame the system sometimes. But before I go there, the people are aware that if we are talking about the great characteristics or the good characteristics of a leader, that person must have excellent communication. In other words, the vision must be communicated with all the stakeholders. And that person must have critical thinking skills, rapid decision-making skills, problem-solving capabilities, strong interpersonal skills. In other words, they are aware, if they are leaders, that they must be transparent. Then what is happening, or what is happening when the people sometimes end up abusing the system? They don't become transparent. It is clear the department did its best that if we come to the issue of finances, the SGP is the one that is responsible for finances, and the principal is there to advise. People know that, but at the end of the day, another problem is when you find out that in some schools, they do have SGP members who are not capable. Those, whether they are abusing the finances or not, they are mismanaging the funds or not, they don't know. It's a problem. And this is where at the end, when we generalize, we think that principals are not managing funds well, whereas there are those who are managing the funds well. Then, my thinking is that if the department one day, or sometimes when they change the policies, they allow this process of shadowing first before appointment of people in position. Because there are those who, when they are looking at the principals from the distance, they just think that the principals are enjoying. They don't even know what they come across or what they do. They end up just thinking that, if I can be appointed one day and be a principal, I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to have a beautiful car. I'm going to do this and that and that. I'm going to relax at home. Whereas when they are appointed there, they realize that opposite is the case. You need to work hard. They were thinking that there is a lot of money when you are a principal. And when they are there, they realize, no. If there are those who are having beautiful cars, they budgeted for, they end up squandering money. But if there will be this shadowing, wherein if I want to be appointed as a principal, for at least a week or a month, I walk around with the principal, wherein I see if really is what I want to be. I think most of the people were not going to apply for these posts because they'll realize that they're just seeing Dr. Sinyosi like a second manager. It's like she's enjoying. She just sits in the office, she just relax. And when they get those positions and they realize that what they are thinking is not correct, then they must come up with a plan of stealing, squandering the money of the government. Then what I'm saying, what is important is ethics. Our principals, whoever is in the department, must have ethical conduct. Here I'm talking about at least the morally acceptable behaviors. And when we talk about ethical conduct, of course, this entails accountability, openness and transparency, which most of the people don't have. If you go to some schools, you'll find out that if we are saying monthly, they must have meetings. You can find out that you cannot find those minutes of the meetings. Then what is happening? How are they paying for the people?
Yeah.
Which is a challenge. The issue of integrity is very much important in our leaders. If all the leaders can have integrity, willingness to do what is right, and this must come from within, that if I'm doing this, which is wrong, I don't feel good. Because this issue of integrity, willingness to do what is right, it goes back even to our schools, to our principals, wherein you can find out they are seated in their offices. Some of them, educators are not going to class, learners are not being taught, things are not going right. And something within you must cry. You must cry that there are poor learners who are suffering, who are losing a lot. If we don't have integrity, loyalty, honesty, and respect for others, it's going to be a challenge. If we can have leaders, the principals, the teachers, whoever, who doesn't have loyalty, it's a problem. When I am being monitored or not monitored, I must know that I must do the right thing. And if we all have this, things are going to be well in South Africa. Whether people are seeing you or not, this is the money of the department.
Yeah.
I am not supposed to squander it. And this must come from within. And sometimes even if the department can have 100,000 policies, if they are not being implemented, I think it's a waste of time. Then this must mean that as leaders, we must monitor whether the policies that are there are being implemented. I think if we do that, and when we hire people who are capable, whatever the public protector was talking about can be history. But what is needed for now? They were talking there about the corruption cases, over 36,000 corruption cases. The question is, what is happening? Where are those who are being suspected? Are they charged? Then if each and every person who is in the departments, in all the departments in our government, can see that they will just say they are whistleblowers, people are doing this and that. At the end of the day, there is no follow-up. Believe me, we are not going anywhere. We have beautiful policies, very good ones. Let's implement. Those who are in management levels, let us monitor whether implementation is being done. I think we can go far. But at the end, if there are principals who are listening, or whoever is listening, let us be loyal. Let us be honest. Let us have the passion to change the poor child, to make it a point that this poor child at the end of the day must get something. Because where I am there is network challenge. I can't even know whether I've exhausted my 10 minutes or not. Chair, can you please assist me?
Thank you very much, Doctor. You have, and we were gracious to give you 2 more minutes. So I think your views were well captured. We tried to also bring them together, and we are also interested as when we open the floor, what the principals, the teachers, and SGB members will be saying after hearing some of your views. But thank you very much. You've touched on a lot of very important issues, having policies, but those not being monitored. How do you capacitate and ensure that there's accountability? And I think these are some of the issues that we are, as soon as we open it up, that are going to come up and also build and come up with tangible solutions. So thank you very much, Dr. Senyosi. For those... Sure.
Chairperson,
Yes, Doctor.
Those who are doing good, they must not be discouraged, but those
Absolutely.
who are doing bad.
Absolutely.
Keep the parliament.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. I think you've heard Dr. Senyosi, and we really do appreciate her taking the call and being part of us. We are now going to move to the to Corruption Watch and Mr. Ngala. I understand that, this report is a very interesting one, and I really would like for Mr. Ngala really to take us through it and touch on various aspects of it. I also understand that there may well be some displeasure insofar as this report and the tone, but again, this is for me an indication of how can we post this discussion, sit down and say, now that you've identified certain themes, how do you then work and say, let us address that? There are very worrying stats on this. This is a work that didn't start yesterday. It's over a decade where issues of mismanagement, abuse of resources, political interference are really part of the education system. And that really infringes on the right to education. You've heard some of those speakers. But again, as I said, it's not my task to speak to the report, but rather let the author of the report speak to it and just share some of the themes and how did it come about and what are they seeing. And thereafter we will then look at further reflections where we open it up to everyone and just basically talk about it and say, now that we know this, what are the next steps, what are the solutions associated with this, and we can then look towards closing. If you're struggling with Zoom, please join us through YouTube. There's a link on the various official accounts. Please use the hashtags Umlambo Foundation together with the NGG Week from the Public Protector as a Twitter account or official Facebook post, and would really like to hear your views so that we can have that 20-minute discussion on what has happened. Mr. Ngala, thank you for joining us and thank you for your patience. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Program Facilitator, and thank you for having us here today. Greetings to Dr. Umlambo and as well as the Acting Public Protector and all the other colleagues who have joined us here today for a very important discussion, a discussion that we need to continue having because, as has been highlighted, education is essential, and it's essential because it's an opportunity for many people to alleviate themselves from poverty, to fight for equality and to fight for justice, given the state of our country and also our past. We as Corruption Watch, we view ourselves as an organization operating in the anti-corruption space. And the work that we do is mainly from a social justice perspective. This is important because we feel that fundamental to human rights and people being able to attain and practice their human rights, we need to deal with issues of governance, we need to deal with issues of accountability, and we need to call for a transparent society, or at least a transparent state. And focal to the work that we do, we found that corruption is impeding on human rights, be it in education, be it in security and safety. Here I'm talking about policing, for instance, be it in the housing sector, be it in home affairs. All these various issues covered by the Bill of Rights as indicated by previous speakers, we found that corruption is impeding. And in the South African context, it's quite serious because these are the most vulnerable people. Personally, for me, these are people, or at least communities that I come from. You know, these are people that have raised me in many respects, contributed to my upbringing. These are people who never had an opportunity to receive a quality education, and sadly, generations that follow from them also haven't. And this is the case that, for most of my colleagues, at least for the current generation of people who are working at Corruption Watch. So we take these matters very, very seriously. And hence, when we do speak about these issues, we speak for the purpose of advocating for change and hoping that, you know, we will at least strike a chord in many people's lives, hoping that people will actually hear what is being said by abomkhulu, abogogo. These are the guardians of children in townships, by children-headed households. These are some of the representatives, by teachers in some instances, by school governing body members as well. We're hoping that, you know, people will hear what these people are saying, because these are people ordinarily we will dismiss. We won't listen to them. We won't even consider them when we're having high-level debates at times. So it's important that their voice is heard. And that is the pride of the model that Corruption Watch currently has, because it's a model that encourages members of the public to report incidents of corruption. And it started from 2012, currently also happening, where we as an organization have received approximately 40,000 now, if I'm not mistaken, reports of corruption. And this is in a number of sectors. Initially, when the organization started, people were surprised to see that communities were coming forward with reports of corruption in schools. It was unheard of at that particular time, not because necessarily that people never thought that corruption wouldn't happen in those kind of spaces, but because the magnitude of the corruption and the people that were involved and the nature of that corruption. So people realized that there was corruption happening in feeding schemes. For example, what would happen here is that officials, teachers, school governing body members would help themselves to food items that were meant to feed children as per the National Schools Nutrition Program. So that then, of course, made at least it made the organization think twice about the issue. And we started looking more into this type of reports. When I joined the organization, I was then tasked with the responsibility at that point in time to see what could be leading to some of these corruption issues that we're seeing happening in schools. And based on just basic research that were done at the time, we realized that financial literacy for school governing bodies was a big issue. But central to that was that school governing bodies weren't necessarily being trained on anti-corruption issues. So when people would be elected into these positions, not necessarily because of their fault, but they wouldn't necessarily understand how to apply themselves. So, for example, in a school, in a suburban school, you're likely to have parents who are accountants, who are lawyers, doctors and so on and so forth. And they get to participate in school governing bodies and apply the skills that they've obtained in their profession within that environment. In township schools or in some rural schools, you don't have that situation. And when that happens, it creates an opportunity for corruption, where you have people then take advantage of the system and have a school governing body member signing a document that they do not fully comprehend. Principals will exploit an opportunity, have a check signed off by the chairperson, not really understanding that it's a blank check and what the implications are for those kind of things. What then followed from that piece of work is that we then sought to actually work alongside a couple of the unions. We had tacit agreements with various departments of education who said that no, they take what we've said seriously, and they're hoping that they can work with us to actually bring about change within schooling communities. We then released a report called Loss of Principle. So this was about 2015, 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And in this report, we highlighted at least 10 reports that we felt quite strongly about. These were issues that we had investigated, and we wanted to bring to the attention of the authorities. These are instances where in some of the cases, one of the cases specifically now, you'd have a principal who was found to be corrupt, but what would happen is that the Department of Education, instead of suspending this person, they would rather than place them in a different school. So what does that tell us? You know, how seriously do we take our children's lives, and especially children who come from very vulnerable communities? It simply means that, well, we view you as a person who may be corrupt, but while we're dilly-dallying, we will actually place you in another environment and hope for the best, or hope that you do the same, depending who's involved, of course. So we then had commitments from departments that no, these cases will definitely be taken seriously, they will be further investigated, and culprits will be held accountable. Now fast forward years later, after several engagements, making several appeals, and calling Department of Education across the country, asking them what progress they've made in respect to these cases and what the status quo is. Nothing had happened, and in some instances they weren't actually responding to us anymore. But the work still continued. Our team of investigations continued to look at school issues and still try to engage schools. In one of the recent cases, in fact, what was learned is that in a school in Northwest, for example, there's a mining company that's operating there. And because of the drilling activity, this mining company is not too far from the school. Practically, for all intents and purposes, it's next to the school. And because of the drilling activity, there are cracks forming in the walls, and the flooring and so on. And when this was raised, nobody wanted to do anything about it. Children's lives are at risk. Every time when this activity happens, children have to hide beneath desks, and no one wants to pay any attention to them. So if you see these kind of cases, and well, for someone like me who's happens to have studied education, and education happens to be one of your first loves, it will move you on some level, and it will bother you, because you realize that these are children of your fellow brothers and sisters. These are children from communities that you know of quite well enough, and you want there to be change. So as part of a series of data analysis reports that we started publishing from about 2018-2019, which is called the sectoral report. This year, we decided to focus or hone in on the education sector. And this is a data report that basically highlights what people have come to report to Corruption Watch. These are whistleblower accounts coming from the 40,000 reports of corruption that we've received. But in the period under review, we looked at 3,007 reports of corruption that the organization has received relating to education. So these are primary schools, high schools, but we then included TVET colleges as well as CETAs. Schools from this sample of reports that we looked at counted for at least 3,400 reports of corruption, whilst CETAs were about 183 and TVET colleges about 67, if I'm not mistaken. And what we learned from this data set is that 45% of these reports are about misappropriation of resources. And by that we mean people are stealing funds, people are stealing goods or resources that are meant to actually help learners at schools. It can be as simple as a piece of stationery, it can be as big as a food item, but it can also be as extraordinary as millions of rands that is meant to at least that's meant to provide education to the children. So just to give an example, one of the cases that we found, or the cases that we see happening with regards to misappropriation of resources, is that principals will, or at least those who are responsible for procurement, go to service providers, be it a shop in this particular instance, buy food items, but then submit the receipt to the school, or a copy of the receipt, return the items to the shop, and ask the shopkeeper then to deposit the money into their personal accounts. So these are the kind of things that we see happening, and that's about as I've mentioned, this is about 45% of the cases. Then we have issues of maladministration. This relates to mismanagement of funds, just money that's meant for a particular purpose being used for another, or money not being used at all. It's about 17%. Then we have abuse of authority, which includes then the victimization of whistleblowers, or and as well as we also have bribery and extortion, and under this we talk about issues of sextortion as well, which is a very disturbing form of corruption where children or maybe even employees are being solicited sexual favors so that they can either get higher marks or better positions within schools. So it is at the backdrop of all of this that we felt that it's important to highlight what whistleblowers are saying, because whistleblowers don't have much of an opportunity apart from organizations such as ourselves and the Public Protector's Office and other Chapter 9 and 10 institutions to actually speak out. And we use then these kind of instruments to actually tell South Africa what is actually happening, and so that we can actually bring about change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nkala. I am not sure what to say. I think we are in trouble, Mama. I think, this is a work of over a decade. So there's a data analysis, a research, a methodology that underwent this report. So Corruption Watch did not sit and thumbs up the data. It's real. It's actually divided in terms of provinces. It's divided in terms of percentages. There's various aspects to that report that when you read it, you realize that we are in trouble. However, in as much as we are in trouble, I'm a firm believer of solutions, and more so hearing from people who are on the ground, who may well have a different view insofar as this report is concerned, or have a different view after hearing from other guests. And I'd like to now invite some of you who've sent through their questions via chat to do two things. So if we unmute you, please, we don't have enough time, just say hello, introduce yourself, and either comment or ask a question. If you're asking a question to a guest, do say to whom that question is directed. If it's a statement or opinion, do share it, but do so really being mindful of the time. But again, colleagues, I think it's key that we do so respectfully, disagree also respectfully, and ensure that we are able to take the discussions a little further. Having said that, I would like to just I think Mama wants to say something.
Well, I just like to firstly say thank you so much for this report. I'm sure it took a lot of time, but it's important for all of us that we know about the situation in our schools and that you are resolved on bringing about the necessary changes. I hope the report is available because it really would be good to go through it. But also, I would just like to check with you if you have any idea if any measures are being taken in order to bring about changes in the schools, in the circuit offices, in the department, and of course people like us who are NGOs who are working in the sector. And Chair, I also want to apologize that I keep on going down. I am involved in another crisis, so they keep on calling me there.
Not a problem, and thanks for that and clarifying. Mr. Nkala, I think the question is clear insofar as this report. Firstly, the accessibility aspect of it, and secondly, are there at least somewhat some input solutions, be it from the TBE or some of the stakeholders, and what is your view there? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mano, for the question. The report is available on the Corruption Watch website, which is www.corruptionwatch.org.za. You'll find it there. If you use the search tab, just look for sound of the alarm and the report should pop up. Over the years, we have made attempts to actually be part of the solution, be it through public education drives so that we can actually teach members of the public about their rights and responsibilities as parents and members of school communities to say what they can do in the spaces. We've also participated in financial literacy drives, which also then, with our focus being on anti-corruption measures or programs that need to be adopted, that we believe at least need to be adopted within schools. And we have made attempts to work with the Department of Education or Basic Education. It has not been a smooth sailing process because, at times you get this one person who's very committed to the process and wants to bring about change, and then next moment that person leaves and then you have to start from scratch again, and then the next person does not necessarily take a particular interest in the issue or the politics of being an NGO start playing. So we can only do as much as we can, and we do participate in various discussions about these kind of issues.
Good stuff. I think, again, it rehashes the point of this being all our problem, and looking towards solutions and doing so together, and not being one-sided, be it an organization only. But I'm keen once again to hear what has been said or what's been tapped out on the chat. And as I make my way through that and curate some of these questions, Mr. Satecha, I don't know if you want to opine, if you have any views on what's been said, particularly in relation to this report. I think the danger would be leaving this gathering on the basis that things are so bad and there is no solution. Or rather, what is it that we could do together as partners, as stakeholders, and really look at the essence of these particular issues? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. What is happening in our country is that NGOs are not being taken serious. Like Corruption Watch, I always watch their program. I think it's on ETV. There is a gentleman who's always giving report in terms of what is happening around South Africa in terms of these corruption issues. And in schools, I fully agree with what he's saying, because we normally hear stories, and some of them we know that there are those principals who are selling. They've opened their tech shops, in fact, selling the nutrition, the stuff which is meant for the learners. So, but it goes back to the issue of monitoring and support. To say, how do we monitor that? Because when you look at how these tenders are being given to those people in terms of nutrition, then you will be shocked. You remember what happened in Limpopo, whereby the box was bombed, in fact, where they were, in fact, submitting their applications to be selected. And thereafter, those who were selected, there was sabotage, whereby learners were fed poison. I think you remember those stories, Corruption Watch, you remember that in the book. You see, the problem started there, because where there is money, there is a problem. And then how these tenders are being given to these people is a problem. We always fight with them, because I remember last time they fed learners with frozen livers, chicken livers. So it was like chewing gum. You understand? So you ask yourself that where was Department of Health? Because they need to approve that and to say this is good for learners and so on. So it starts from the back. And then if those people are not monitoring these processes, people will always will end up doing this. And the other issue of governing bodies, to be honest, remember they've got only 3 years in office. And then most of them, or 50% of them, they don't finish that. Because a person will be elected, being given support for a year, the following year, a learner will be transferred, and that person automatically is out. Or the learner is doing grade 12, that person will automatically. Then you need to start afresh now to train other people. And remember that most of our parents, they are not employed. There is a lot of poverty. And the moment you elect them in the school governing board, it means you have appointed them now. They take it as employment, then they expect something. And if something is not there, then it's easy to be corrupted now. Because as leaders now, if I say, let's do this, fortunately now, recently now, in terms of Circular 2 of 2020 now, all the schools now are obliged to use what you call EFT. Yeah, and we don't just sign checks. It's unlike before, where I will just go to my friend and say, come and sign. The poor parent, because he's not learned, does not understand, will just sign a blank check. So these days it's very difficult, because all the 3 people involved now, they need to authorize, and I cannot authorize alone. So the chairperson need to be there, and then somebody need to sign in, so that we can be able to do the process. There is another issue now in terms of what we are saying, the issue of LTSM. People were not aware that there is little money there. So now we have got what you call the businesses now, forums, which are also now coming now strongly towards schools to say they need tenders there. So which is a very serious problem. And if you don't comply, you become a victim. My friend was attacked, and then he was shot, I think, plus minus 8 bullets, but he survived because he refused to comply with the business forums. So as we speak now, he's no longer the principal. He's afraid to go to school. You see, that is exactly what is happening, because some principals are not, in fact, the majority of principals, they are not protected in terms of this part of corruption, what is happening in our schools. So I agree 100% with you, but let's get the system itself. If we can get the support from our department, and people can be honest and understand now what ethics means. So I believe that we can be able to build our schools correctly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Satere. I mean, we see these in the news, right? And when you hear the account, it's real. This is someone's father, husband, brother, and uncle. And really, law enforcement also needs to come on. It doesn't stop at DBE only. It's really a concerted effort from all the stakeholders that are involved. And you spoke about the Department of Health. You know, I think for me, there ought to, and there probably is, working committees that consist of these various experts. But we need to, knowing what we know, say that what then do we do from a quality assurance perspective insofar as nutrition is concerned? How often, for example, have a checklist of some sort to be able to say it has now passed the quality control aspect of it? It may well be there, but the question is it efficient? Has there been enough training, for example, for the person who does the quality control? And I think, you touched on the issue of capacity. We need to not only capacitate the teachers and the principal, but the SGB. These are community members by extension. One way or the other, their kids go to the very same schools. And if we don't capacitate, and the department and all, I think, the foundation, for example, plays a very important role. And, it talks about winning poverty through education. We need to be having training sessions. We need to be in a situation where Corruption Watch comes on together with the various stakeholders and say, this is how you'd be able to detect these type of things. This is the type of behavior, because it evolves. I like how now we are using technology insofar as EFTs, but there's always a way around it. And if you are not prepared or properly equipped, you'll always be found to shortened, and that's a problem. But we really need to discourage the killing, the undue influence, and we need to speak up and say to law enforcement, do your part, protect everyone in the system. This is the future of this country that we are gambling with, and we cannot allow that, and we need to be doing our part. I'm just getting some of the questions. If you've posted a question, please do resend again. We may have had technical glitches, so some of them may well not have come on, but if you are online and you want to get off the mute button instead of posting, we're happy for you to do so. Again, due to limited time, please do get on, introduce yourself, and pose a question and or share your sentiments insofar as what you've heard here today, and how are you ultimately going to be part of the solution. As I said, we don't want to leave here saying things are worse, whereas we could be talking about how as stakeholders we come together. Anyone who would like to go off mute, please do so. We're happy to hear your views and your reflections. Okay, I see that there's a question that has come on there. We're just trying to get to that question. In the meantime, if you are comfortable, please come on and then just opine on the question that you've shared there. Someone close by can just read for us for the benefit of the room. Thank you. I think the part in short on insofar as imparting knowledge, informing, and really looking at the impacts. Ultimately, the goal is to be a corrupt-free country, and we can get there if we work together as stakeholders, if we commit. I think really this is a journey, and in as much as the alarm has been raised, it doesn't mean that it ends here. Please keep your questions and comments coming. If there's anyone in the room who'd like to opine, I'm happy to give you the mic. But thank you for being with us and being part of this discussion. With load shedding and some challenges, really, you've been there, you've been part of the journey. We'll also just look at social media in the meantime just to see if there are views or comments. But we are seeing Nemkula Z, we see you coming on the screen. If there's a question or view from you, please come on. Mr. Nkala, I don't know if you have one or two things maybe that you want to opine on and or share, if anything. I'm happy to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, program facilitator. So, I guess for me, it's I've got two questions. The one relates to capacity within schools, because we know as well that educators are under immense pressure to deliver. The acting public protector even mentioned that in some instances there are still schools with classrooms of over 120 children. That's huge. And so what's the school's capabilities of being actually to address issues of administration in those particular schools, where it's not just about looking at whether children are promoted or progress to the next grade? Do they have those capabilities to actually develop systems and to make sure that there's good governance within those schools? That's my one question. Then my second question is in relation to SACE. And I know that SACE runs workshops relating to educator development, and it's important, and educators always have to make sure that they are part of, or at least they're registered with SACE. But how are they proactively dealing with issues of corruption? So for instance, we're trying to look at a situation where there's a system where people are named and shamed who participate in corrupt activities. And do they have some kind of register like that? And how does it look like? And what's their availability in terms of being the lead, at least, in trying to deal with some of these ethical problems that we see plaguing our schools?
Very two important questions. And again, with some of the stakeholders being online, we'd really want to hear your views and comments. Anyone on inside the room, happy for you to come on and just share your views. They usually come on the screen, and they can go off mute if they need to.
So to speak.
Do you have views or comments on YouTube, perhaps?
Nothing at this stage.
Not as yet. Perhaps while we're here and some of the comments and views are coming on, may I then ask that to those who are still online, and through the foundation, as part of fixing and moving forward, dropping an email and contact details, so that we start having sort of a database of some sort, right, where we are able to send you an email, invite you, be it the public protector discussion, because again, it should not be a talk show, but rather solutions. And having people on the ground who are experiencing these challenges, I think it would be very powerful to say, perhaps Corruption Watch, you are sitting in Braamfontein, you are not on the ground, and this is what we are experiencing. if you are looking at part 2 of raising the alarm, come and spend a few days instead of just collecting data or someone coming anonymously. And I think that's the strength in having stakeholders coming on board and being part of it. There's a question that has come on as well. So someone closer to the screen for the benefit of everyone, if you could just read it aloud, please. Okay, the recording of the session will be available on both the Public Protector's website, social pages, including the Umlambo Foundation pages as well. You can access that, and would really encourage for you to continue using the hashtags and for us to keep having these discussions. So continue tagging or sending emails to the respective organizations, and for us to keep talking. If, in my view, there are programs happening at the various schools, there's some issues of training, for example, that is required. Corruption Watch often has a chat with the DBE. Let's share those, capacity aspect. If the foundation is thinking of training or empowering, it's time that we have the DBE in the room, where they also share some of their interventions. What are they doing? How are they taking these discussions forward? And I think by doing so, we'll be really talking to the topic of the day, good governance, ethics, and how we can strengthen that, not for our benefit, but for the black child, benefit of the future generations, and empowering communities. I'm well aware of the time. It's 5 o'clock. Traffic, load shedding, but there's a question that just came on now.
Discussion like this must continue until such time results.
Most definitely, and I think I'm glad that there's a positive reception insofar as this, and in the interest of time, technology as well. And I believe that there will be instances where we are on the ground, be it in Popo or otherwise, where everyone is in the room and is having this discussion. So without wasting everyone's time, it's 5 o'clock. I'd like to thank each and every one of you who spent time with us, our esteemed panelists, and thank you to our operators operating very difficult circumstances, load shedding, technology. You really have done a steady job, and we are looking forward to continue having these discussions. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Super.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Some but thank you. It's very enlightening discussion.
Yeah, it's scary.
A scary discussion,
Yeah.
but an important one. I think, again,